Greetings, dear reader. I am Erik Eldritch, and today we'll be reading my book, Don't Worry, I Won't Be Long, The Tale of Greypelt and the Thieves of Reggio. The men of the thieves burst into the clearing. Inexperienced in horse-borne combat, all but Ferrante had already dismounted from their steeds. When they saw the naked woman armed with only a stick, the gang congratulated themselves on successfully surprising their quarry. But the sight of her massive reptilian companion gave them pause. When Ferrante saw that his men were close to losing their gusto, he spurred his mount forward. "The beast is only flesh and blood," he called out. "Nothing but a scaly ox. I'll have its guts upon my sword." With that, Ferrante charged his horse forward towards the enemy. Latifa, already incensed, bolted forward to counter the attack, like an excited dog running after a thrown toy. Although Ferrante had the bravery to joust with the dragon, his horse did not. The Thief Guild were not knights, and their horses were trained for riding, not for violence, let alone encounters with primordial predators like the Ninki Nanka. The steed balked and reared as the reptilian titan closed in, forgetting about its rider and trying to defend itself by kicking with its hooves. Ferrante was caught by surprise by his mount's antics and tumbled off the saddle backwards. Latifa, however, was no stranger to horses. She waited while the steed reared, avoiding its dangerous hooves, knowing that her prey could not maintain balance on its back legs for long. The second the horse was back on all fours, the Ninki Nanka lunged forward and plunged her fangs into the equine's neck. Sensing a bit of fight left in her victim, Latifa mustered her strength and threw the horse down to the ground. The vicious reptile smothered her prey with her own bulk to avoid any painful kicks, while the last ounces of life force seeped out of the unfortunate creature. Ferrante was not unhurt by this fall, but he managed to pull himself off the ground while Latifa busied herself with her equine victim. He was about to take advantage of the distraction and attack the reptile while its back was turned, but Greypelt was rushing in to defend her partner. As soon as the cynocephalus was close, she took a wide swing at Ferrante from beyond the reach of his sword. The thief put his shield up to block, and the force of the blow almost knocked it from his grasp. Despite the shock, Ferrante maintained the wherewithal to counterattack with a quick slash, but he couldn't cross the distance to land the hit before Greypelt had brought her staff back to defend the blow. Sparks flew as his blade scraped against the strange gray staff, and Ferrante realized what it must be. Sylvan ironwood, a mystical lumber cultivated by the enigmatic forest-dwelling sylphs, hard as iron, but light as wood, or so the legends claimed. Ferrante paused. The weapon itself was nothing especially dangerous, no more so than his own sword and shield. But to have acquired this thing spoke volumes of its owner. Sylphs were not known for generosity. To be wielding one of their ironwood weapons, the cunning canine must have coerced, convinced, or conned them into handing it over. Anyone who could do that was not to be underestimated. Suddenly the stories of her clobbering a tavern full of burly men or dragging her victims off to hell at the command of Orcus didn't seem so far-fetched. "Surround her! Now's our chance!" Ferrante called out to his men, embodying bravery despite his own misgivings. Strength and number would be the thieves' best option against this strange foe. Greypelt knew it too, and lunged forward to try and land a decisive blow before the mob could join in. She swung hard into his shield arm again, and knocked it away enough to follow up with a thrust from the opposite point. The blow struck him just left of the sternum, and Ferrante felt lucky to be wearing his metal breastplate as he stumbled rearward and fell flat on his back from the force. By now a few of the braver brigands had closed in to assist their leader, but likewise Latifa had completed her kill and was lunging forward to defend her master. Two of the thieves charged past the fallen Ferrante to attack. Latifa intercepted one of them, swinging her long neck like a whip and throwing the unfortunate fellow across the clearing. The Ninki Nanka fell upon the dazed thief, stomping on his sword arm to nullify the threat, and tore into him with reptilian fangs. The other swordsman rushed for the cynocephalus. Greypelt dipped the point of her staff to feign vulnerability as the brute charged forward, and then raised it up at the perfect moment to catch the fellow in the chin. The battered bandit slashed or rather flailed with his sword before falling, moved more by momentum than by the gray matter that had turned to mush inside his skull. Greypelt easily parried, knocking the sword from his limp fingers, and a second head wound from the staff made sure that the thief would never flail again. To the men of some regions, seeing their leader fall to the dirt and their comrades killed would have sent them into a fearful retreat, but not so these Calabrians. Instead, they were almost tripping over themselves to take revenge for their allies. And in their thievish minds, they as a group had been assured success by their goddess Laverna. The more that fell, the greater the chance that they would be the last one alive to claim the glory and spoils of victory. Greypelt might have complimented them on their bravery, if she had known their language better, but respect for them would not stop her from sending them to their afterlives. As the next wave of hot-headed highwaymen stampeded towards her and her beast, Greypelt commanded Latifa to return to the Roman pool. If the men were determined to press their attack, the water would be the safest place to mount a defense. The Ninki Nanka was an aquatic creature, and in the pool she'd be able to use her instinctive hunting method of snaring and drowning her foes. The canine Amazon herself turned heel and ran, hoping to put some distance between the attackers and not face them all at once. As she ran past the sword that her most recent victim had dropped, she knocked it into the air with the point of her staff and caught it in her hand. Greypelt was not very familiar with nor impressed by these long, thin swords that were in fashion across Italia, but nonetheless she could find a use for one. Propelled by cynocephalid muscles and unhindered by constraining clothing, Greypelt quickly distanced herself from the trio of thieves that had chosen to follow her. When she came to the spot she was looking for, the wolfish warrior halted abruptly and hurled her scavenged sword into the torso of the nearest enemy, running him through completely. As the two remaining men caught up to her, Greypelt slinked behind one of the old Roman walls. The thieves split up to take their target from both sides, but as they approached, the sly dog lunged after the man coming at her from the left. She swung her ironwood weapon in a wide arc that struck with terrible force. The swordsman had managed to raise his slender blade to block the strike, but the powerful staff only knocked the lighter weapon aside. The blow struck the thief hard in the temple and crushed his head against the ancient stone structure on his opposite side. He crumbled to the ground, not yet dead, but damaged beyond salvation. The last thief tried to catch Greypelt by surprise by coming around from behind, but her superior canine hearing revealed the ploy. When the brigand rounded the corner, Greypelt was ready for him. This one fared better than the others and exchanged several attacks and ripostes against the cynocephalus and her staff. But ultimately, Greypelt managed to land a heavy thrust to his chest that knocked him off balance long enough to allow the Amazon to wind up for a full-powered slam. The swordsman managed to raise his weapon for a desperate block, but the heavy staff plowed through, knocking the weapon out of his grasp and shattering his collarbone. The man fell to his knees in pain and looked up only in time to see the sylvan staff smashing apart his own skull. No! Ferrante stumbled into view, still winded from their first exchange and the race across the ruins, but rage was rapidly replacing weariness. The cool-headed commander had lost all control at the sight of his underling's obliteration, his promise to his boss forgotten. "How are you so damned strong?" he barked as he stalked forward with his sword and shield at the ready. "You're no sorceress, no demigod. You have nothing, not even the clothes on your back. Your luck and your life run out with me, devil dog." Greypelt only replied, "Don't worry, I won't be long," both a promise and a reminder that she couldn't understand a word of his Calabrian Latin. Ferrante rushed in first and paid for it with a thump to his shield before he could step into measure. But this time, the brutal force of the staff wasn't as much of a shock. The cunning criminal braced himself for the blow and then shoved forward with his shield to try and subdue the weapon as he stepped closer to get in reach with his sword. The wolf-woman was almost caught off guard by the sudden change in competence, and leapt sideways to avoid her foe's thrust. The desperate move left her no time to counterattack before Ferrante followed and attacked again, but in the split second available to her, Greypelt shifted her grip to engage in closer combat. With the staff held in the middle, she could strike with either end in quick succession, at the cost of range and power. The wily wolf immediately demonstrated this technique to her encroaching foe. She batted away the thief's second attack and responded with a flurry of strikes from both ends of her staff, tying up both his sword and shield as her bewildered opponent fought desperately to adapt to this new development. A few blows struck with partial force against the sides of his helmet, not enough to finish him, but slowly whittling away at his sense and stamina. Just as Ferrante seemed to be grasping the new rhythm, the cynocephalus surprised him again. She broke the quick tempo of her strikes to wind up for a powerful backhand swing right into the thief's knee. The swordsman had been expecting another light attack aimed at his head and failed to defend against the new strike. The cudgel struck hard into his unarmored knee, and the hard ironwood forced the joint to collapse in the wrong direction. Ferrante fell to the ground, unable to support himself on his broken leg. Greypelt dashed backward to observe and assess her handiwork. It was quickly apparent that her foe was no longer able to stand. The pain, fatigue, and burden of his metal armor and shield were too much to bear on one good leg. Like a wounded animal, the deputy of the guild continued to defend himself, his sword and shield at the ready despite the pain. But now Ferrante and his enemy both knew his end was near. The long staff could strike beyond the reach of the nimble sword, and without the strength to stand, the swordsman could not close the distance to counterattack. He tried to worm his way back to where the men had tethered the horses, but in this condition it might as well be miles away. Just like the wolves she resembled, the cynocephalus circled her prey, analyzing the best method of attack. Greypelt jabbed with her staff to force her opponent to lift up his shield, and then switched to a powerful swing down upon the edge of the shield, slamming the metal rim into the unprotected thigh of Ferrante's formerly unwounded leg. He howled in pain, and in the distraction, another blow knocked the shield completely from his loosened grip. The beleaguered bandit kept trying to scramble away, all the more desperately, while keeping a sword between him and his oppressor. The devil dog easily matched his crawling pace and shoved the point of her staff into his face, testing him. Out of instinct, the swordsman tried to bat the weapon away with his blade, but as soon as he committed to motion, the warrior woman swiveled her tip away from the parry and pushed it hard into Ferrante's throat. It was not a merciful way to finish off an enemy. The initial impact did its damage, but not enough to be immediately fatal. The cynocephalus kept pushing and pinned her victim to the ground with the tip of her heavy staff digging into his neck. The swordsman struggled as the crushing cudgel plugged his passageway of life-giving breath. His free hand tried to wrench the heavy thing away. His sword arm slashed against the ironwood pole, but only drew sparks against the sylvan pseudometal. It didn't take long for the lack of air to rob the man's limbs of any real power and any hope of escape. Greypelt watched the grimacing face lose its color as the blood failed to flow. Finally, the limbs stopped struggling, and the fearful eyes froze in place. Ferrante was dead. Meanwhile, on the other side of the ruins, Latifa was dealing with her share of the swordsman. As her master had commanded, she leapt into the old Roman pool and submerged herself. The thieves, taking this for a retreat, took chase, each aspiring to call themselves Dragonslayer by the end of the day. The men surrounded the pool and shook their swords and shouted at the creature, hoping that one would distract the beast and lure it into an ineffectual attack, so that the others could pounce and deal a decisive blow. The only fault in their plan was that the ancient Archosaur never made ineffectual attacks. Latifa lunged with lightning-like agility against her pick of the hairless apes. As planned, the brigand tried to dodge the blow, but the Ninki Nanka was too quick for him. Crocodilian jaws snapped shut around his torso. Although pain precluded any possibility of counterattack from the doomed man, Latifa was wary of metal weapons and no mind-reader. With another show of primordial power, she thrashed her head from side to side, throwing the sword from the thief's grip and then dashing his head against the ground, neutralizing him for good. The other men were also taken by surprise and slow to counterattack as they had planned. The first to move was greeted by a powerful tail slap that smashed his ribs and flung his sword from his hand. Against the second attacker, Latifa flung the corpse in her jaws across the pool. The impact knocked him on his rump and the dead weight pinned him to the ground. A truly brave but foolish thief tried to jump onto the creature's back and stab at her throat, but a sudden twist of the Ninki Nanka's long and flexible neck brought her sharpened horns to bear. She deftly punctured the man in the torso and shook him off into the water, where a powerful paw pinned him to the floor of the pool. The last man, still on his feet, thrust his sword forward from the edge of the pool, trying to scare the creature into releasing his comrade. Latifa, at this point, had nothing to fear from these dwindling soft skins, nor did her Archosaurian mind ever experience the emotion as evocatively as humans do. After all, humans are the mammalian descendants of the little shrews that had scurried between the legs of the pre-Diluvian reptilian titans that the Ninki Nanka's ancestors had hunted for food, and each organism retains the echoes of their evolution. The waving sword was dangerous to the Ninki Nanka, but it was just an obstacle to overcome. It did not trigger the spiral of distractions that the thief was hoping for. As soon as the Ninki Nanka gained a sense of the rhythm of the outstretched arm, her jaws snapped around it, and a powerful motion jerked the limb and its owner into the water to join the comrade he had tried to save. This was all in plain view of Andronikos, still tethered to his pillar by the side of the pool. At first he had shared his fellow thieves' enthusiasm for combat, but seeing such destruction and loss of life on his behalf was tearing out his heart. "Please, stop!" he called out to the two survivors. "It's not worth your lives." The word struck a chord with the remaining men. They did not go to battle to give their lives for their countries or protect their loved ones. The thieves only fought for gold and glory, and it was increasingly obvious that neither were to be had here. Though they would not return to Reggio as dragon slayers, if they acted swiftly, they could still return with the little Panati and their lives. If that was all Laverna was willing to grant them, then that's what the thieves would take. Andronikos recognized the living guildsmen as Bruno and Marino. They both relied on their thiefly ways and slowly crawled towards the Panati's pillar to avoid exciting their reptilian adversary. Andronikos saw the way Bruno clutched his chest and realized that the reptilian's tail snap had broken his ribs. Knowing that the burly swordsman was at least twice his own mass, the Panati felt thankful that the beast had only seen fit to knock the air out of him with the same tail slap earlier. The bandits' movement did not go unnoticed by Latifa, but she was too preoccupied with drowning their companions to give them her full attention. The unwounded Marino reached the Panati first and began working on the ropes. "The horses aren't far from here," Marino explained to Andronikos. "If we bolt for the tree line, I think we can reach them before the dragon catches us." "I don't know how to ride," Andronikos admitted. "Then you'll saddle up with me," Marino offered. "You're small. I'm sure my steed can bear us both." As Bruno approached, Marino told him, "I'm nearly done here. Make haste for the horses. You'll be the slower of us." Bruno nodded and complied. Latifa was watching them closely. She didn't like that the intruders were colluding with her prey, the little long-eared one, but she wasn't sure what her responsibility was. The master had seemed quite keen to keep the little one locked up at first, but then she had told Latifa to leave it and engage in battle. It seemed to Latifa that the battle was over, with the last two intruders limping away. Did that mean she should resume her guard over the little one? Or had that command been rescinded for good? The Ninki Nanka craned her neck to look in the direction that her master had gone, but she had disappeared behind the trees and stone structures of the Roman ruins. Unsure of what to do, Latifa issued one of her menacing hisses, hoping that it would frighten her little prey into obedience. The sound startled Bruno and Marino, who were just experiencing it for the first time, and after just witnessing what the creature was capable of. But upon realizing that the monster was only making noise and not pursuing, they continued what they were doing. "What does it mean?" Marino asked Andronikos. "She's angry," the Panati answered, although Latifa needed no interpreter to convey her feelings. "She?" "That's what the dog had said," Andronikos explained. "Before the fight, she commanded the beast to watch over me, keep me from escaping. She struck me with her tail when I answered the signal, not as hard as she struck Bruno, though." "Then the dragon will probably chase us when we flee," deduced Marino. "I have your knots undone. I'm just holding the ropes tight so that it looks like you're still bound. We should make a run for it as soon as I let go." "Count of 3, then?" "Laud Laverna," Marino prayed. 3, 2, 1, go! The thieves bolted for the tree line, and the mighty Latifa was enraged. She angrily leapt out of the water to give chase, but then hesitated, looking one last time for her master in a sign of what to do. Greypelt was still nowhere to be seen, so the Ninki Nanka gave in to her own desires, to smash the intruders and demand obedience from her prey. The reptile raced after them. By now the human and Panati had nearly reached the line of trees that marked the boundary between the ruins and wilderness. If they reached the forest, they might lose the large creature in the densely packed trees, but Latifa felt confident that she could catch them just before they made it. Suddenly, a herd of horses galloped out of the trees and into the ruins all at once. Bruno, who had reached them first, had driven the horses of the dead men forward to distract the belligerent reptile long enough for his fellow thieves to mount up. The ploy worked. The Ninki Nanka's natural instinct to chase down fleeing prey collided with her desire to pursue the Panati and its conspirators, and left her muddled, snapping at any steeds that came close and getting into scuffles with the animals as they bucked and kicked in their defense. None of the horses did any damage to the highly trained war beast, but they did accomplish the distraction that Bruno was hoping for. Andronikos and Marino scurried into the trees where their horses were waiting for them. Marino mounted first and then hoisted the Panati up into his lap. The trio rode as fast as they dared through the forest. The sounds of crunching branches and loud hissing behind them indicated that the reptilian titan had freed herself of the stampede and was charging after them. As soon as the riders reached open ground, they kicked their horses into high speed, making as fast as they could for the road. The Ninki Nanka was quick on the battlefield, but not a long-distance runner, and she hated to stray far from her master. The beast turned back to the ruins and let the thieves go. The thieves did not trust their luck and continued to ride hard for quite some time. Although they quickly noticed that the dragon had given up on them, they assumed that its canine master would be bent on revenge as soon as she realized that they had escaped. But before they were in sight of Reggio, Bruno howled in pain and the trio brought their horses to a trot. "I can't go on like this," Bruno confessed. "The lizard cracked me good. Every time this damn horse takes a step, I'm shaken in pieces that aren't meant to shake. I need to stop or I'll be dead by the time we make Reggio." "If we stop, you'll be dead for sure," Andronikos replied, with panic still in his voice. "The doghead can see in the dark. The sun's already setting. If we wait, we'll have to stop before we reach the city walls. She'll sniff us out and run us down, and you'll be pining for the time when all you had were cracked bones." "Hard to imagine," Bruno groaned, "at the moment. If I have to ride much further, I'll start to think a vacation in a dragon's gullet will be preferable." Bruno paused to think for a moment and then concluded that "You should go on without me." "You're not thinking straight," Marino warned. "You'll be butchered meat if you're caught by those devils on your own." "We'd all be butchered meat if we met them together. Just ask the dozen dead we left at the ruins. But listen, she's only after the run, right?" Bruno reasoned, indicating Andronikos. "She's never even met me. I'll hide myself away, sleep through the night, and hobble my way back to Reggio in the morning. Besides, Ferrante went after her. Maybe she's not even alive." Marino looked grim for a moment, but saw the logic in it. "Just remember, friend, if you never make it back to Reggio, I'll get to say I'm the only one who faced the dragon and lived to speak of it." Andronikos was shocked by the remark, but Bruno chuckled. "Nonsense, we'll both be smothered in barmaids, begging us to tell our tale. Now get yourself out of here." "Laud Laverna," Marino chanted, and kicked his horse back into a gallop. The thief was too focused on riding to look back, and the Panati was too ashamed that another sacrifice had been made on his behalf. But Bruno wasn't wasting time on sentiment either. He was looking for a secluded spot to lay himself down for the night. It was already getting too dark to see clearly, and his wounds were clouding his mind, so in the end Bruno let his horse wander until it came to a spot that it felt safe. The spot was off the road and surrounded by enough boulders and trees that the swordsman felt reasonably secure. He carefully lowered himself to the ground, feeling shards of himself crunching in his chest with every minor motion. He rolled his cape up into a makeshift pillow and fell asleep on the ground almost immediately. Thank you for joining me, dear reader. If you'd like to help me out, you can press the like button. Let me know what's on your mind in the comments. And you can buy my books on Amazon. Link in the description. And with any luck,